Thank you for joining the carrier training session for the Schlumberger Transportation Management System for North America Tender Management. By this time in the training videos, you have already received a TMS overview of what the project is intended to do, both from a business perspective and from a process perspective. In this training agenda is showing you some additional training scenarios that will benefit the carrier. We will also be discussing the tender management process flow. Furthermore, we will take you into the actual TMS application, look at the tender acceptance on how to perform that systemically, and also how to perform a tender rejection within the TMS. Towards the end of this presentation of this training video, we will also discuss some next steps and some additional training videos we will be directing your attention to. Let's get started. TMS training scenarios. From a standard workflow perspective, as you saw in the training video for the TMS overview, the carrier's responsibility begins at tender management. Once tender management has been engaged, there is a process to enter gating events within the application. Once you enter the gating events will further trigger an electronic invoice creation in the application. For purposes of this training video, we will look at the tender management side, how to accept a tender in the TMS, and furthermore, one of the exception scenarios on how to submit a tender rejection. From a process flow perspective, to keep it from a very simplified format, we will begin with the tender management. That will be the focus of this training video. Before we get into the application, please note that Schlumberger has taken many steps within the internal walls of Schlumberger in its TMS. We will be managing our transportation requests by the different segments that we operate within the Schlumberger North America, and we will eventually get to a planning and tendering shipment stage. Once we begin the tender and shipping stage in the OTM or the TMS, we will transmit this information electronically via a carrier portal to the carrier that has been assigned that tender. Once that carrier has been assigned a tender, you will gain visibility in the carrier portal. You will also be receiving an email notification that describes additional information on what that actual shipment means for transportation. It would include information regarding line items, product, hazmat, and some additional information on that tender notification. Let's take the opportunity to see in the application how to accept a tender within the TMS. In the carrier portal, under the same menu as Tender Manager, is the actual screen where you will see the tenders that have been assigned to you by Schlumberger. Let's take a look at the first scenario of accepting a tender. All of the actions in the TMS are action-driven. For example, if we wanted to take an action on the very first tender that appears here in the queue, we will simply place a check in the checkbox, focus our attention on the Actions button, and you will notice that you have two specific actions the carrier can take on their carrier portal. You can accept the tender or you can decline the tender. Let's focus our attention only on the accept tender. As we accept the tender, you will note that there is an accept this shipment box. The purpose of this box are for two reasons. The first purpose is to give the carrier the opportunity to select a carrier reference that provide meaning for the carrier in the Schlumberger TMS tool. These are or may be shipment reference numbers that are automatically created in your applications. Because we are manually entering this reference, here is an opportunity for you to place a number according to our shipment ID that provides meaning to you. For purposes of this scenario, I will simply place the reference of CR12345. This provides significant meaning for us. because if you use your carrier reference number, you can associate this number in future transactions beyond the tender, as in gating events and also on the invoices where appropriate. The second purpose, or the second idea of why we have this screen here available to us, it's the pickup date and time. This is the specific calendar date and time where you'll be passing information to Schlumberger on when you expect for this shipment to be made available for pickup. OTM, or the TMS, provides a calendar feature. If you wish to change the time, you would select the time first, then select the date. I'll repeat that. If you wish to change the time, you will always select the time to change first, and then select the date. For all practical purposes, I would select today's date and time for the training scenario, and simply hit Finished. Once you hit Finished, you will receive a message on the screen that says you have successfully completed this transaction. We have shown you in the application how to accept the tender in the TMS. Now let's focus on tender rejection. If you notice, we are back on the online booking and tendering screen under the Tender Manager. You will note that these are all the transactions that are available to you under the Tender Accept and the Tender Reject screen. If you notice, we've already taken specific action to the first tender that was made available. By simply hitting refresh, you will note that one of the transactions disappeared from the operating queue. This is true for every single tender that you have taken an accept or reject action on. It is no longer available on the queue. So, simply as a training, when you select your Tender Manager and you blindly search for open transactions, all the transactions that have not been taken any specific action will be available to you at this point. Now let's focus now on the Tender Reject. From a very simple action, you simply place a check mark on the checkbox, go to Actions, and hit Decline Tender. Once you decline tender, you will notice that you will have a Remark Qualifier ID. Under this Remark Qualifier ID, you can place a comment that simply says the reason for your rejection. For purposes of this scenario, I will simply place the following note that will be made available to Schlumberger once you finish the transaction. You simply hit Save once you've identified this carrier comment, and then simply hit Finished. Once you hit Finished, the TMS will tell you that you have successfully modified the following transaction. If you simply exit the checkbox and hit your refresh button, you will notice that there are no more transactions on this online booking and tendering Tender Manager queue. We now direct your attention to a future training video which is related to the submission of gating events in the carrier portal. Thank you once again for taking the opportunity to review the Tender Management training video for carriers and their carrier portal.